Okay. Holly,
Hello.
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Hey. She can't hear me scream her name. but I'll scream it again. Faye!
Hi,
How's it going?
it's going okay.
Good.
I didn't know if book club was really going to happen, and I have been just like, I just got back from Florida this week, so I'm still catching up. And I got off the phone with my boss, and I looked at my calendar. Like, I'm still mentally not on the right time, and I looked at my calendar and was like, "Wait a minute, book club time." And I meant
I get that.
listen in. So here I am, but I'm going to stay off video because I
Oh,
don't
you're
have
fine.
today, and this is also my lunch hour, and I have to make a sandwich.
Yeah, understand. Well, it's good to have you. It's good to see you, even if it is just your lovely picture.
Well, you too.
Thanks.
Is it okay? I
Um,
didn't know if you guys are really, I don't know if you guys are really talking about Teresa Torres. If you're talking about something else, I can
We're
drop
we are going to finish this book today. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're finishing this book today.
one way or another.
Yeah, that's right. We just
I
have been
love it.
dragging it out for a little bit. And I think, there'll probably be future opportunities to revisit bits and pieces of it because the book is so valuable. But
Yeah.
we've been trying to finish this book, I think, for almost a month now.
I could tell in Jason's recent post or email, and he was like, can we just put this to bed already?
Yep.
Well, I'm going to put you on
Not a
mute
beer.
while I go and rattle
Sure,
around in
sure.
the kitchen. Or put myself on mute, I mean.
No problem. I am fast and furiously, while Jason's waiting to join, Holly, you know about book club, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Vaguely.
Vaguely.
My first time attending.
well,
I do know, yeah, I've known about it for a while. I just
yeah,
struggled to
so
make it.
yeah. I think Jason has expressed like we like book club. Book club is good, but like Jason is but one mere mortal human, and so the places and spaces he can be. So myself, Brandy, and Manesh are going to take over book club moving forward, and trying to like organize and be present and facilitate. So I'm literally making a survey so we can find a new date that works for folks, and then we'll do a vote on a book. So hopefully here in the next couple of days, we'll have some information around new book club.
Are people saying Fridays isn't good, or is it?
I think when I met with Manesh and Brandy, like the general consensus is we probably wouldn't hurt to know. And get folks' feedback, because we might have
For sure.
might have worked off the assumption that Friday worked when we started it, and it may have shifted, and just seeing that we've only had today's a full crowd here, but knowing that like what if we changed it, would that help or would that not help, and knowing like it'll be scheduling chaos, we'll never be able to find a time when we're all available at the same time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Figuring that out. So hey, Matt.
It'll change week to week, right? Like, I mean, you can block this out. And I mean, theoretically for me in the beginning, it was like, well, Fridays are better because it was supposed to be no meeting day, but that never really pans out, It's always Friday afternoon escalations, or you took off Friday afternoon to do something personal. So it's one of the two.
Yeah. So we're not committing to changing it, but we're committing to asking the question and then see what comes back to us. So
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hey, Allison, will you also be including like anything about sort of frequency or format?
Yeah, so we talked through a few things, and right, what we want to do is figure out what other people want to make sure like we haven't just made our own assumptions around what we think book club could or should be, but knowing that right, we'll never be able to get like scheduling harmony amongst the full book club attendees, and right, knowing that folks, the accountability part is really the most important part.
Is there ever such a thing as scheduling harmony?
No,
And
doesn't exist.
by
If
the
it
way,
does, it's scary.
we don't make any assumptions.
No.
I think that we should have it as breakfast club.
Definitely.
I think it should occur at breakfast and be
I
in the
mean,
library.
I'm an early bird. I like it, but I know that's my gut feeling. So Jason, I was stalling and killing, and I let the cat out of the bag.
Oh, no. No need to.
Well, careful, some of the cat. I think Matt was joining late. So
I thought we were finishing Teresa's book today.
I did commit to that. I was like, we're finishing it one way or another.
Like, wow, we're finally getting it done, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, so I think we're also going to look at a way to try and adapt a synchronous conversation about book club too. So I don't have a solid answer for that, but like if you can't attend whatever date or time we settle on, if it's still Fridays or whatnot, you still have ability to put comments or have an interaction in the book club channel around chapter, topic, something, so that we keep folks right. That scheduling harmony can be as close to as possible, true as possible. So cool. Jason, where do we
Hi.
start to finish the book?
I think based on the feedback that we're getting, probably Holly and I should go into the conference room and use the single thing in the middle. Do you want to, we were going to start with chapter 14, right?
Yeah, I can start there.
Okay,
Um,
cool. And if you'll get us started while we move,
mhm.
we will get better situated.
Cool.
All right.
I'm gonna
And
lie and tell you.
I'm pulling it up on Kindle on my computer.
14, show your work.
Nothing is
Part 3, developing your continuous discovery habits. All right. Start
In other
small.
words, how do we make this shit real?
Very, very carefully. Yeah. All right. Faith, in that, I'm going to put you on the spot. So start small and iterate. Any thoughts around that chapter and or the that concept?
Just a second here.
That's okay. So I'll start yelling out things that are in the book. So building your trio, starting to talk to customers, working backwards.
Oh yeah, so I can totally relate to this. This year we started to do a little bit more of this. So our UX designer and myself and one of my product managers that reports to me, we started our own little trio that we're in a process of overhauling a legacy product that we really need to take care of. So starting small, I think, is very critical. And one of the first steps before you even get into doing the discovery is building the team. And I think you've got to have some of those relationships in place already. That helps if you have that in place. But if you don't, it wouldn't hurt to like just get some folks together that you're thinking of, doing this with, maybe do some one-on-ones perhaps, and chat them up about it and see, how receptive they are to it, what ideas they have, and so forth. That can be a way to spark the conversation and get it going. And so that's kind of what we did, really. I mean, I got together with the UX designer and started that conversation because we had already had some experience working together, the three of us, on a previous effort where we did this for the FAA. So we knew that we could work well together doing this. And I think that definitely helps if you've already got the rapport going with those folks. That's fantastic. That's just more support that you have behind you.
Yeah. So you have a trio that you're working with today, right?
Yeah, we do. And sometimes we'll bring in the architect.
Okay. Yeah.
Who is like this super smart like engineer dude that is just incredible. And he brings a totally different perspective to things. So I really appreciate that. That he'll say, "Oh, well, did you guys think of this?" Or by the way, we can or can't do that. Like, he's there to sense check the feasibility of things, but he will also, he comes up with these like really just, I don't know how to say it, out there ideas, but they're like, once you start to validate them, you're like, wow, this actually really makes sense. So.
Yeah. I've always found like you can do it as a duo, right? Product design sit very close to UX. They sit very close to each other. And not to say that our UX folks don't sit close to our tech folks, but like you could do it with two. but when you have that third role in there, like, because right, your developer, your tech, be it the architect or your tech lead or whatever, they're going to give you that, I don't want to call it a curveball, but that additional perspective that you're not seeing when you're down at the product level, focusing on, is this the right thing to measure? Is this the right problem to solve? The designer is thinking through, like, how is it, what's the experience going to look like? How approachable is this going to be? And then the feasibility part really, or even viability perspective, I think comes from that technical side. Not to say that we don't think about it. It's just not the first place we stop when we're doing our product thing. So that's a great.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency to want to think about too many steps ahead.
Mhm.
What we were doing was really key. It was very key to say, okay, what do we really want to know from these customers?
Mhm.
What are some assumptions that we're making right now about the new world and where this is headed?
Mhm.
What do we want to find out? Like, we might be totally surprised when we test these assumptions, and that's great. We might be surprised in a good way or a bad way, but what are they? What are the things that we're assuming are true, or assuming our customers want or value, that are high risk, that we really need to get a handle on?
Mhm.
And that really helped, I think, steer the conversation initially, to set some goals on, or some targets on what are those things that we want to take to them as a trio, and start to validate and start to uncover and unwrap and see what's there. And when you take that approach to discovery, as we're on this adventure together, we're just exploring, and we're treasure hunters, really. I
Yeah.
think that makes it fun, and that it takes away that whole pressure and stigma about, like, oh, I can't do this, or oh, this is too much.
Mhm.
So anyway, I'd be curious to hear Faith's perspective here as well.
Mhm. Yeah. And if Faith was lunching, and Holly, whoever wants to jump in, yeah.
Yeah, I've been kind of listening with half an ear.
Okay.
I've mostly been in situations where we often have not had a dedicated UX person, so a lot of times I'm wearing that hat too.
Mhm.
But sometimes we have had that. I've generally worked very, very closely with developers because I've been in very small companies. So usually we're all like almost within arm's length of each other. I agree that, like, the developer, or architect perspective, not just that they're good at, like, is something feasible, but the good ones come with other ideas. Like,
Mhm.
they will either, like, sometimes they'll say, okay, so since I understand what the customer's problem is and what you, product manager, are trying to accomplish and where you're trying to take the product, the best ones will bring things to the table like, all right, we might not be able to do the thing you thought you wanted as
Mhm.
a solution, but here are some things we could do. And often I'll find that those things are perfectly acceptable or better than what we had brought to the table to start with.
Mhm.
The other thing that I find that they're good at is they kind of know what's out there in the technology landscape generally more than I do, in terms of, like, there was a time when jQuery didn't exist, or different kind of jQuery based libraries, or UI
Mhm.
component libraries and stuff didn't exist. And you might go in, I might go in either with something that's completely unrealistic, that there just is no technology to do and it's just not anywhere close, or working within sort of today's constraints and kind of going, I mean, they're good at sort of saying, hey, you know what, there's this new approach that we could use that would
Mhm.
kind of get your, achieve the goal you want better. So so yeah, our situation, most I've been in situations where the trio thing is not necessarily as clear cut, where the roles haven't been as clear cut.
Mhm.
And I honestly, I've only ever worked with, I've worked with a couple of UX designers who are extremely creative, but not very easy to work with, like highly opinionated, I guess.
They
But
live
I have
everywhere, Faith.
yeah, designers.
Yep.
But I have worked with one who was exceptional in that, he was super good at understanding what the customer needed or what users needed, and proposing solutions that were kind of appropriate to the skill level and the just appropriate to the audience, even if it wasn't necessarily the latest, coolest, hottest way to do a mobile app. He was our mobile designer. He created designs that were modern, but sort of met customers where they were. And that's just, I think, just kind of rare. But
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, those are kind of my thoughts about it. We have not really had actual trios, and so I have never, in the last 5 years or so, 5 to 7, I haven't really had a need to kind of like formally form up trios and have any kind of like formality around it, because I've just been working in small environments where that's just what we, that's kind of just what we do.
okay.
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation where we're in a small environment and it's not formalized as like a Teresa Torres trio or anything like
You
that.
just have scheduled meetings called Product Trio, right?
Yeah, it's right. It's just understood amongst us.
Yeah. This is fun. When we talk, we can see each other on Jason's screen. This is fun.
We're going on now.
Awesome. Yeah. So right, as a consulting group, and I'd be interested, I want to hear Holly's answer on how she works with this too. But our product design team is embedded in our product team. So, right, we are tied at the hip, so to speak. And then we have our engineering team. So when we are in client engagement, the trio is normally present, but like, do I have a long-term relationship with any one of them? Kind of not. It just depends on our particular engagement. So I had one other experience where I had the trio in a regular like team augmented, we're all in this together type mentality. And I kind of use that as my gold standard for this really worked well when we did these things. When I think about forming new teams or starting new engagements, making sure those types of things are supported. So giving our developers time to talk through what they think is the approach, the designers to share their stuff, and then doing our work as product to tell them what we know and what we don't know. So, Holly.
Can you hear us now?
Yes. Were you doing the beeping?
I don't know. I was talking a lot. Nobody was ever hearing me.
Oh no.
Yeah,
The beeping was the timer on my phone. Sorry about that.
Oh,
No,
you were the
that's
beeping
okay.
phase. Okay.
That is just so rude. Just keep talking over it.
Oh no.
Burn something up in the microwave, I guess.
Yo. But no, I was gonna say it was still a while back you were talking, I think, Allison, about the duo versus the trio.
Mhm.
I agree with Teresa's point, and it's ideal, I think, if you have that trio, but a lot of companies, big or small, I'll
Mhm.
say it, really big companies, a lot of times you don't really have that trio, like you don't really have a formal product design piece engaged, right? At least on certain products or portfolios. So a lot of times, I think ends up being a duo, but I think that, we were talking about like bringing in the development or the solution architect side. To me, that's the most important part of the duo. I think from a product perspective, many of us are design focused or usability, we're going to think of those kinds of things. We understand at least at some level that impact. So we're tying that into our thought process. I'm not saying that adding a third eye there isn't valuable, but we can kind of represent that. But what we can't really represent is the technical feasibility and the things they'll think about, right? So for me, like the most powerful thing in a company where like NCR, where this is not a thing, this is not something people do. There's no formal trio, duo, be friends. It's kind of like, I literally have always, you probably have heard my joke about the 2 towers, which if you know our office in Midtown, and you do, Allison, but Faith, I don't think that you do, but look it up online. It has 2 towers, and it literally is like living Lord of the Rings every day, because the 2 towers are basically at war and throwing things at each other. Because all the IT and dev people are in one tower and the business people are in the other tower, and they're both blaming the other for everyone's problems.
Oh, they should have co-located everybody and then you could have fought on the same
This is
floor.
a recorded line, almost. But that's just how it happens, right? And I think that happens at a lot of big companies. You know, I think about a lot of places I've been, and inherently that becomes the mindset, right? And so what you get into is a pattern where everyone's kind of being protective, right, and defensive. And so if you create those relationships, like what Teresa's talking about, it's I've gone kind of off book or off behind channels and created that power team. I've gone to the development lead, who's kind of like at a peer level for myself, and be like, hey, you're the head of the ship on that side. I'm the head of the ship on this side. We should be friends. And together we should be the two parents essentially of this product portfolio. So let's do this together. And then when you do that, and like Matt, I'm making it fun. I think that's so important. When you pull people in, you engage them, and you like, hey, let's go talk to our users. Let's go do this together. When we're going to go talk to our users, what do you think are the things that are important to talk about? I think that engagement is very powerful, because regardless of what happens specifically in that conversation or not, just the fact that you do that, right, and you're establishing that is huge for the success of your product long term.
Yeah, and when it comes to working with you were talking, someone made a comment about UX people being difficult sometimes or challenging.
Opinionated.
Opinionated, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you may never be able to do away with that, right? People are who they are. But one thing that's helped in my situation has been to set the expectations up front with that UX person on how the conversation is going to go, or at least to share our thoughts and ideas on facilitating the conversation so that we're not stomping on each other during the interview. It's coordinated, and once you start to get into the flow and do several of these, consistently, I think that it just kind of comes naturally. Like you get to learn how each other works and how to give each other space, to say their part or do their part, and everybody gets along. Hopefully.
Yeah, so I've probably had the same, the strong opinionated designer. It's interesting. So I was referring to the gold standard. The designer we had her resourced half-time to our project, but she knew so much about our work that like literally it was just like, can we phone a friend, call and see what Jen thinks? Jen would come in and say this, and this. And then it wasn't necessarily, she wasn't saying things that we didn't already know, but she was able to like solidify with research, like this is how this works. And this is how we don't want to move this button, or we don't want to make this more difficult by these things. And even though she had strong opinions, they were backed up with research. And so I think sometimes, I don't know that it happens as much in the technical space. I think it happens in the designer space, that opinion shows up without, I don't want to say the receipts, but without the research behind it. And so folks they just said we can't use that color or we can't do that thing, and they didn't tell me why. And so I think that's always an interesting thing to see if you can uncover with those strong opinionated designers is, well, why is it that way? And that helps build that shared understanding, both from a product perspective, a technical perspective, sometimes depending on the nature of what it is.
I think you've got to respect and want to understand, right? If people want to just be understood, I think at the end of the day, we want people to listen and understand where we're coming from and not just judge us based on the word said, because if you're me, the words are probably the wrong ones. We also, it's important that we give that back to everyone else, right? And I think I've had my favorite, we were talking about that, Allison, I was thinking about this guy at NCR on the UX side he's not there anymore. His name is Ryan Gunn is his last name. And the arguments, I'm not the arguer, so I was out of it, but he got in an absolute fight with my development director over how many icons we were allowed to have on our UI. And we had to, they brought me in thinking, well, Lako, my development director, thought I was going to be the bat she was hitting him in the head with. And he thought I was going to be the moderator, and I was coming in as mom to be like, all right, kids, let me hear both sides of the argument, and then I'm going to vote. And what I did, I think something, Teresa would have backed, which was, well, that's interesting, Ryan. And Lako, I hear where you're coming from. Let's go talk. is 5 icons really too many? Like, can you only have 3 buttons in any app at any given moment in time? And then you have to go to the nightmares drop down? Like, what do you guys think, right? And getting them both to agree that we would let the users, like, let's go with open-minded and hear what users actually say and look, show them the pictures, right? Show your work,
Mhm.
walk them through their thought process. And we heard where Ryan was coming from. And then he got to hear a customer say, basically, I don't agree, and here's why, you know, and the customer heard him too. And so it was a very good conversation. We all learned something, I think, from it, which is, you know, the UI and UX people are opinionated, but at the end of the day, they don't know everything, right? And sometimes what's for one thing might not be good for another thing. You know, you have to look at that differently. And a lot of times, I think as a designer, you might do a lot of similar things, but sometimes things are not as similar as you think. And so you're like, well, this was the right answer over here, and you're kind of copying it, but maybe that's not the right experience. Even if it's the same users, it's not the right experience or a different channel or a different thing, you know?
Mhm. 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 Jason, we haven't heard from you yet. I've seen you playing with the screens, so you have any
Yes,
comments?
I've been distracted. I've been continuously discovering how this meeting owl works. You know, I have not worked as part of a formal product trio at all, although we did have, at Silver Pop, we had a similar concept, but it wasn't around discovery, it was really around delivery. We called it the three-headed monster. And also kind of fun, but not really around discovery, as I said. So that's actually been one of the things that I've been really anxious to read and learn from this book about and put into practice in some of the engagements that I'm working on as well. The client that I'm working with right now, that it's not really, it's definitely in this avoiding anti-patterns and understanding that you're gonna have to focus on the patterns yourself. And I have started to use things like I love the interview snapshot. You guys have heard me talk about that and quite a bit. I think it's a great simplified tool and a great way to capture meaning from interviews in a way that other people can use. I've been doing a bunch of interviews with industry experts this week for a product initiative for this client. And we've got some specific assumptions that we have about what their process looks like, what their journey looks like, what their experience looks like. And using that has been valuable, and sharing it with my engineering lead and my designer, and and my client product manager will get a look at all of them next week. And so I'm really excited to use that as a trigger to potentially say, hey, I'd like to get the client saying, hey, I like this approach. I'd like to participate more in this approach, and maybe start shifting it that way. But they're running a pretty waterfall command and control. Somebody gave us an idea, we have to go deliver it now.
I don't know anything about that, Jason. I don't live here.
Right? I mean,
Well, that's interesting. I was going to say, what do you think about this whole idea of working backwards? So when the Eye of Sauron is staring at you, he's like, we got to do this, you know? A lot of the things that John Mansour said a couple weeks ago really helped that conversation of, okay, well, start with what is going to make these people successful at the end of the day. You know, what sort of outcomes are they trying to achieve, and start working backwards. In most cases, I find that the folks up in the Tower of Sauron are very receptive to that, and are not necessarily going to strike you down right away. So I was just curious, like, what you all thought about that in terms of apply some of the continuous discovery stuff, or even, you know, just discovery in working backwards, and how much success you've had with that.
That's a huge part. I'm just going to jump in on that. That's a huge part of how I've been working with this specific client, is really forcing them to work backwards and talk backwards, because they've already identified what they believe is the solution. And part of it, the product team that I'm working with, to be fair, they're in an organization that is very technology and technology innovation driven, in terms of they've got an asset that they are trying to create
potentially valuable ways to put it to use, solve some problems that there is some internal expertise about, but that consumers and end customers don't fully understand yet.
Mhm.
And so they're trying to articulate problems that customers don't really know that they have. And that's a fun place to be from an innovation perspective, but at the same time, the product team's mandate is to commercialize some stuff that a bunch of other people came up with, find a way to get this in front of customers and make money with it. So the habit and the skill we're trying to build with them is to do exactly what you're asking about, Matt, and that is to work backwards and say, if we ship this, what problem is it going to solve for them? And please stop saying it's not going to solve any problem for them right now. I understand it's not going to solve a problem for them right now. It's going to solve a problem for them in 5 years. What problem is that?
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
love how that- sorry.
go ahead, Holly, go.
I love how that becomes the conversation. People get so hung up on it. It's like arguing about, like
Yep.
what goes into the cake, in the sense of like, you're like, oh, it's not gonna help me with having cake. It's like, but it is, because it's how we make the cake. We're not gonna get to eat cake. We don't bake a freaking cake. Sometimes, like, can we just stop? Like, I don't have cake. I know you don't have cake right now. That's why I'm trying to put baking powder into a bowl. Can you leave me alone for a second?
Yeah. I had an engagement earlier this year where, right, the client, very waterfall product organization, was open to change, but they just didn't have language. They didn't have any, like, to your point, like, we know there's another way to do this. It's not this way, but we don't know the words to get there. And so, we started to Jason's point, like, let's talk, what does the customer want? So we were building an internal tool. So Matt, probably very similar to the pains you have in internal land around, well, the customer out there doesn't care about whether or not we sunset this system or roll over to something new. As long as the thing that they do still works, there's no impact. But if you start paying attention to what's going to change out there, that tells you the first slice of what you need to build in the new state or the new land. And so we were able to go after that and go after it from that narrative, and got them to change their complete way of thinking. They thought they had to build this great complex tool and then test it. And I'm like, no, we're just going to build a little bit so we can test it to see that it performs the way you all think it's supposed to perform, to give you the outcomes you want. And once we have that information, we're going to use that data to inform what we build next, or where we build further, so to speak. And I think that's another way, depending on who you have in the room. If it's from a technical perspective, they're like, but why? Especially if it's a layer removed from the end customer, you can explain to them, we're not going to build this big monster. We're just going to build a baby monster that will tell us enough information as if we're going in the right direction.
Yep.
Yeah. What about this this concept of faulty assumptions? This can be a touchy subject, especially if the assumptions came from executive leadership, and they're invested in those ideas or their assumptions. How do you go about testing these and presenting the results in a way that's not, hate to say I told you so, like, so there's a very delicate way to do that.
I think that's where it becomes super important. I'll jump in on that. Super important, like what she was talking about. She was talking about, I think, in the terms of showing your work with how you got to where you got, with determining an opportunity or priority, whatever. I'm gonna stop waving my hands in front of the aisle. But I think it's even more like using those same things when you're actually talking about their assumption or their pet thing, right? And if you've gone out and you've done all this discovery and realized and found out from your customers and actual users that that pet thing is not going to be valuable, it's not going to solve a thing, that becomes even more important. I'm flashing back to that's exactly an experience I had at Fiserv, where my CIO went and I found out because my team was suddenly busy. They had no time to work on the roadmap and things were slipping and everything was going to hell in a handbasket. And I'm like, what are you doing? I turned into, I don't know, the Wicked Witch of the West. And I was just like, oh, what's happening around here? And they're like, well, we can't, we're so sorry, but we're working on the Blue Sky project. So I'm like, all right, back up. What the F is the Blue Sky project? And I project that that Brian had put into place and literally diverted resources to. So I got stormed down the hallway to his office to have a conversation about that. But the important part, and this was like a learning experience for me, what changed Brian's perspective was not me storming down the hallway and being the Wicked Witch of the West, surprisingly. But was, you know, after I walked in, I was just like, hi, need to talk to you. Why is the team working on something that I don't know about? That's apparently called Blue Sky, and where the hell did you come up with that name? That's terrible. In that conversation, I was at least level-headed enough to start asking the questions. And I asked him a lot of questions about what he had validated that got him to what he thought, why he thought this thing was important, and why he thought it was worth diverting them from the product roadmap that we were supposed to be delivering on, right? And it made him think. And he's a very smart man, and this is in no way a ding on him. I love him to this day. He's a good friend. But he was just like, all of a sudden he stepped back. He's like, you're right. It's like, oh my gosh, you're right. He's like, I don't know. I mean, I think I know. I feel like this would be, but you're right. I didn't do any discovery. Basically, he's like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, exactly. That's what I and my team do, right? So let's team up, let's back up, let's team up, and let's go do this. And when we went back and did that, we proved out that what he was trying to do, what he thought was a thing, was not something our customers would ever have been interested in. Right, but it was presenting back that discovery, right? Both presenting, did we do these things? Have we checked these things? And I think you can do that in a way that's not combative. Might be enough to make them go, oh, hey, you're right, I didn't. Let's go check that out. And even if you skip that conversation, go do the discovery. If they've thrown it over the wall and been like, hey, go deliver this, you know, I need this earbud. You're like, I don't think that makes any sense because we sell ATMs, but sure. And you go out and go validate with your customer, hey, would earbud be helpful when you're using an ATM, right? Coming back with that information and presenting that, you know, work like Teresa was saying, I think that becomes the way that you sell that, right? So it's not an opinion. You don't get into the opinion war. You said that because that's a big problem, right? Or any kind of cognitive bias. You take them into what you went through and what you discovered. And so to your point, not carefully, I think in a way where you're not saying, I did this. And so duh, as you can see here, clearly you are wrong. But so just say, you know, here's what we learned, right? I took this thing you gave me and I went off and this is the process I went through to validate that and do the discovery. And this is what, and based on that, this is my recommendation, which might be, don't do your thing at all, do the thing I originally said, or it might be something in between, right? Or just trade-off. So.
Please tell me you left that conversation laughing like the Wicked Witch of the West on your way back down. I follow Susan Stavitsky on LinkedIn. She's a product manager and senior PM actually, and she's got some very helpful content. I don't know if y'all have seen her stuff, but she wrote one this week about just this, which is when we were kids and we were in math class, we learned to show our work. And so I would agree, Holly, that the point you made about bringing them along, and Teresa writes about this too, and showing your work, like how you got to 2 + 2 = 4. Make it more about what you learned that is either of benefit. I think you can look for some nuggets maybe and some pieces where you're like, okay, this is something good I found out that will be of benefit to us. And on the flip side of things, well, this is still good that we found this out because 1, it's either going to reduce the risk that we face as a business, or 2, it was good to learn that there's going to be quite a bit of risk here, and we don't want to go down this path according to what we've learned. So just present the facts, essentially, and let the story tell the story, but let it go from there. Let them make up their mind from there. And then if they still disagree, maybe you have to bring in some allies. Maybe you need some friends to come join you and support you on this journey, to convince this person that, hey, this isn't such a good idea.
Yeah, totally. That's a great point, using other stakeholders as well. It was kind of one of my approaches too. We have, like, in that case, the CIO, it was I could bring the CPO and the CTO in. I'll be the CIO, and we'll have it duke it out. But I love what you just said, right? Be on the show your word, but take them with you. And that's, you know, I didn't really hit on that enough, I think, but it was really, I think in my example, key, because Brian, you know, as a CIO, probably once upon a time was in a world, excuse me, where he had those more direct interactions and then stopped having them. He's just sitting around, you know, talking with other C-suites and talking with other CIOs in the secret CIO club or whatever, right? And so they, of course, are all his fan club and think that these are fantastic ideas. And other CIOs, oh yeah, these web service things you're thinking about doing, they're great. Everyone's gonna love it. It's amazeballs, right? And not at all thinking as a customer or a user, but they don't mean to be, right? It's not nefarious. It's not, I think I know better. It's just, they don't even know that they're doing it, you know?
It's their surroundings
so-
and their environment too. So like if I'm only listening at this altitude level, my
that bubble,
perspective is
yeah.
very different from the nuts and bolts level. Yeah.
And pulling him into that conversation, and he appreciated it so much. He said, thank you so many times for getting him back out and reminding him what we were really doing and who we were doing it for. But it was so funny having him in those conversations, and he's sitting there physically in the room a couple of times or sitting on the phone call and even catching himself where he tried. And I would jump in and do my best Perry Mason accent and be now, Brian, you are leading the witness. Because he tried to put it in their mouth. He'd be like, but wouldn't you like to have? But don't you really want? And I'm like, now, sir.
Yeah.
Because people, we don't realize how much we try to do that if it's our pet thing. And I mean, we can be guilty of it too, right? That we have a vision and we have a thing and we're biased to it and we're trying to validate, you know, that we're doing the right thing and not really doing proper true discovery in that exercise. And so I think it's important for all of us to make sure we're not, you know, leading that witness. But I think it was so important for those stakeholders sometimes, not just to see our work and how we got there. That's great if they can't come along with, but at least invite them, right? Especially if they're, the more difficult they are, the more I think that you want to invite them to that, because there's nothing you can ever say or do, I think, that will compel them the way that if they hear from the people who basically pay the bills, right? The people who are giving you the money that makes payroll, if they're saying, no, that's not something I would pay you for, well, then why are we having, right? Why would we go down that path?
Yep. I'm gonna have to jump in a few minutes because I do have a hard stop and I probably need to go do a cartwheel or something before my next feet. But
I'm so impressed. I just need an E and you're gonna do cartwheels?
well, I have a very interesting meeting to have after this, so we'll see. I may just mentally prepare myself for a moment.
So how do we want to land the plane?
Faith, you got any recommendations?
Recommendations for how to land this plane?
How to land the plane, Faith? How are we doing it?
I'm not a pilot, but I play one on TV.
I love it.
I'll take that.
Well, I mean, so this has been kind of a long arc from when we all first started with Teresa's book, right? And I mean, I guess, you know, Jason, I'm curious how you would want to sort of wrap this up. I guess the intent is to move on to something else after this session. And you know, I thought it was an interesting experience. So I didn't actually read as much of the book as I wanted to. But the parts that I was able to read, I thought were you know, good guides, especially for people who are maybe, you know, especially for people who are like developing product managers, especially because there's a lot of things that look similar, like, well, we have customer meetings, well, we do prioritization, we have conversations, but the way that she structures it, like, it really gets to the inside of that. Like, not all conversations, not all customer conversations actually meet the needs that, you know, in the way that she's talking about. So I think that was really useful. You know, in terms of the overall process, you know, I haven't been in a book club before, so I think, yeah, I know that I have tried to learn to just be more on point and more focused in my comments, which is really hard for me. So I've been kind of taking that process note, and you know, I'm looking forward to what the next iteration of this is. But you know, I'm curious what other people's sort of headline takeaways were. So for me, it was both being a better process participant and also, you know, kind of taking some of those key notes from the book and seeing how I can, apply and adapt those things and improve my own practice. So I don't know, that's not much of a plain landing, but maybe an approach. Maybe
It
we're on
sounds
the
like an approach to me.
Yeah, I did this because I wanted to test out having a book club with the Product Coffee Premium group, and because we're all pretty passionate product people, and this was one that Allison, you'd read, but a lot of us hadn't really read.
Mhm.
And so I've been really pleased with it. I think the outcome is, I did read the vast majority of the book. I probably need to go back and reread sections of it, but the accountability of having the group was really valuable to me. I picked up a lot of good tools from the book that I've been really excited about. And I think my big takeaway was her constant reminder that you probably can't do all, you can't go from 0 to 60 in 30 seconds on building these continuous discovery habits. It's figuring out what is the keystone habit, and that she covered in this last chapter, and that is just build the habit of interviewing your customers weekly, talking to somebody weekly.
Like
And
that
there's
every
such-
week or better.
yeah,
That
so-
comment was resonating
Yeah.
really hard with me. Like,
Yeah.
it don't have to be perfect out the gate. We don't have to boil the
No.
ocean and talk about product coffee, right?
Not
We
every
can't get
interview is going to be
everywhere we wanna
fantastic. Yeah.
But every week better. That's the
Yeah.
goal.
Yeah, yeah. I think for book club experience as a whole, I think it's about that it's accountability, but opportunity to say, I read this and I think this is, and then hearing it either come up in conversation or having an opportunity to reflect with other folks that have read the same material to say, did they hear that or read that the same way I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggled with this part. What did you think?
Yeah, that's
what
been
did you
very
take away
valuable
from
for
it?
me. Yeah. Yeah. Future of book club. I noted this at the top before everybody was on. So Manesh Patel, Brandy Reeves, and myself are going to be taking over the reins from Jason, not because Jason just needs a break for a little bit. He's got other things to do. So there'll be a survey that's going to go out in just a few minutes around the day of the week and time of the week. I don't expect to find a period of time where we're all available, but certainly anything that fits better for you, it could be the same time. Just be sure to take the survey. It's going to show up in the Slack channel. And then we're going to have book selections. I'm hoping by the end of this is Friday, so maybe early next week that we'll also send out via survey. We'll do a vote for that, and that will be where we start, hopefully first week of December. So that's the plan.
I will say, sorry, can I just, you were talking about what it did for you, Allison, and just resonated with me, this is the first one I made, obviously, and I'm I have big goals and dreams of reading books. I have a whole pile on my bedside table. I have 8 books. I was telling Jason the other night that are in progress
Surrounded
right
by
now,
books,
very
yeah.
sticky notes sticking out of them of where I was. But this, having something like this, I think is important because, it makes you go through it, makes you do it,
Mhm.
so.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's good. I'm excited for what the next book will be. I'm hoping it's one of the 8.
And
We've got a couple, so you get to vote, so you get to choose. Hopefully it'll resonate with you as well.
Allison, jumping in to take ownership and carry this forward is actually a huge part of the vision for what we're trying to do here with Product Coffee is take ownership, create a community that is relevant and valuable for all of us. And the lifetime membership that most of you have, I think everybody on this group has the lifetime membership. The reason that I did that was specifically to get people to jump in and help define this community and make it what we want it to be.
That membership, yeah.
So.
What tribe? And I'm I always think you're the chief of the tribe. To Allison's point, the chief. If you look at an Indian tribe, as a Native American, the chief do 98%. They just say,
Mhm.
then they go back to their TV.
And bring me food.
Me smoking peace pipe.
But I know you have to go, Allison. Thank you so much stepping in and you really led a lot of these conversations when things came up and I couldn't do them. So thank you so much for doing that. And I'm thrilled that everybody's participated in this. I know Faith, you jumped in and led one or two.
Yeah, and I think with that part of it won't change. It's just going to be about let's see where we can find most similarity and availability for folks. And like I said earlier, with the asynchronous conversation, like, is that something that we can also help support that accountability? So I think there's some future opportunities for everybody that wants to read more, do more, collectively share more. Awesome. Happy Friday. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hi, good to see everybody.
Thanks.